When I first saw Pillars of Fate, I was really intrigued because Ivy Studios has amazing production value on all of their games, and the overall aesthetic of this game just looked freaking sick. So I really wanted to try it, and I picked up the box at Gen Con at the Ivy Studios booth, which was freaking sick, by the way, and I flip it over and I see that it's a lane battler, and I actually am not a huge fan of lane battlers, so I was immediately less excited to try it. However, I did give it a try. Did this game change my opinion on them? I guess you'll just have to wait and see. I mean, I guess you really don't have to. I guess you could just stop watching or just skip to the end of the video. Don't do that, don't do that. Pillars of Fate is a lane battling game for two divine beings. Over the course of 3 ages, players will be competing to gain the most renown, or points. And the player at the end of 3 ages with the most points is the victor. And if you're new to lane battling games, basically there's typically 3 lanes, and the players will be playing cards that have different strengths, and then the player with the greatest strength in each of the lanes will win that lane. But what makes this game interesting is that you don't always want to win the lane, because sometimes the lane, depending on what cards are played, is actually negative points. But we'll get to that little twist in just a moment. Players will each take their own respective identical decks of cards. Well, they're not completely identical because each one has their own dope set of art on the cards. However, the numbers and suits on them are identical, I think. I'm pretty sure. Maybe I should check that. So one player will take the Sun Champions deck and the other player will take the Moon Champions deck. Players will shuffle their respective decks and take a hand of 5 cards. But once each player has taken their respective decks and you have set up the board by laying out a quest card of the appropriate age in each one of the lanes and adding 1 modifier to the center lane. And the game comes with a bunch of these quest cards, so it kind of changes up the feel of it every time, and these modifier tiles, they will also change the rules every age as well. For instance, typically gameplay will continue with players laying 3 cards in each lane. However, this modifier here makes it so that the center lane on this particular age, players will be laying 4 cards instead of the normal 3. And the game comes with a whole stack of these things, which is pretty dope because it really changes the way you play the game. But before you dive into the action, each player is dealt 3 of these divine cards, and these things are super shiny. Their production on this game is absolutely amazing. Anyways, you will receive 3 of these. Each player will secretly select 1 and then pass the other 2 to their opponents, which is super cool because you only get 3 of these cards for the entire game. But because of the drafting, you know 2 of the 3 cards that your opponent has. So you will probably want to try to keep that knowledge in your back pocket, so to speak. I would like to pause for just a moment and mention that this was a review copy provided by the publisher. However, the thoughts and opinions in this video are my own, and Marshall Lane here would like to remind you to please consider clicking that subscribe button. And as always, thanks for watching. But once you've done all that, each player takes their respective deck, gives them a good shuffle, whoa, and then they deal out 5 cards to themselves. You will always have 5 cards in your hand. And on a player's turn, they simply take one of their cards and they place it into one of the 3 lanes. And if you are the first player to play a card face up in a lane, you take that respective lane's pillar marker and you set it on your side of the board. And actually, this neoprene mat doesn't come with the game. This is an additional purchase that you would probably want to make. Is it necessary for the game? Absolutely not. Does it increase the overall aesthetic and feel and pleasure of the game? Absolutely does. This thing's pretty nice. It's got the embroidered edges and just looks freaking cool. Anyways, this pillar is nice to have because should there be any ties, the owner of that pillar will decide how the tie is broken in that particular lane. But play will continue like that back and forth until there are 3 cards in each lane. However, players are allowed to play 1 card per lane face down. So there's a little bit of a bluffing aspect there. And in addition to playing 1 card per lane face down, players must play exactly 1 of their divine cards per round, which is sometimes good and sometimes bad, depending on what cards you have. But at the end of the round, the board will look something like this. Each player will have played 3 cards into each lane, unless there's a modifier like this one where they had to play 4. But then players will reveal all of the face down cards that they've played. And now players will see which lanes they won or which ones they didn't win. So before we go into calculating who won these, let's take a look at the cards. In the upper left-hand corner is a card strength, and the upper right-hand corner is a suit. They come in either scorpions or feathers, because each one of these quest cards that the players will be fighting for will have two different prizes, and depending on which suit, feathers or scorpions, has the majority, that will dictate what the reward will be for winning that lane. And these rewards aren't always good. So there's almost kind of a bluffing aspect when you're playing your cards face down. Your opponent doesn't know what suit you're playing, so they don't know if they even want to win that lane. You may want to intentionally lose lanes, or that's a way to kind of poison the well, so to speak, is play a card face down voting for negative reward and play low strength cards trying to force your opponent win that lane. They'll actually lose points because the quest cards will have two different symbols on them. There is an omega symbol, which are positive points, and then there is a sickle, which are negative points. So let's take a look at this lane here. Just at a glance, you can see that the scorpion suit won this one. It greatly outnumbered the feathers. So the reward is going to be this positive 5 omega. But then you look and see what the values are. So it looks like the sun player has a value of 10 and the moon player has a value of 14. So the moon player won, so the moon player will gain the scorpion reward, which in this case is 5 positive points. We're off to a good start. So then let's take a look at the next aisle. Which in this aisle, I played one of my special cards here, and this says reverse the suit of your other cards in this lane. So I actually have voted 4 times for feathers. So the feathers have 5 votes to the scorpions 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 votes. So the scorpions actually won this one. The winner of this lane will gain 2 points. However, if it went the other way and feathers was the majority of the suit, then the victor would have actually lost 3 victory points. But let's take a look at those totals. The moon player has 18 and the sun player has 16. So moon barely beat him out again. So we gain another 2 points. And in this last lane over here, it looks like we have 5 feathers to way more than 5 scorpions. So the scorpion is actually the winning suit, which unfortunately has a sickle. So the winner of this one is actually going to lose 2 points. I have a strength of 17 on this one. My opponent has a strength of 14. So I won that lane, which is actually a bad thing because it actually cost me 2 points. So those 2 points that I got from that last lane, I can just toss them back in the pile. And that completes one of the 3 ages that makes up a game of Pillars of Fate. To prepare for the next age, you just remove those quest cards, put out new quest cards for the appropriate age, players take all their cards back, and then you grab a new modifier and put it in the center. Now this age, you can only play 2 cards into the center aisle. And then you just rinse and repeat thrice times. And the player with the most victory points is the winner. So that is Pillars of Fate in a nutshell. And just like other Ivy Studio games, the production on this is out of this world. The cards are a great quality, they shuffle well, they have a linen finish, the art on everything is super cool. I really dig the overall aesthetic of the game, especially when using the mat. The mat isn't 100% necessary to play the game, however, I feel it does kind of keep everything a little more organized and I highly suggest it. The only thing that kind of sucks about the mat is that it doesn't fit into the game box, which actually the box is a nice size though. I mean, for the base game, everything fits in there nice and tight and not a whole lot of empty space. However, it would have been super cool if maybe there was an unfoldable board or there was a way to store the neoprene mat into the box. And really that's kind of like my biggest complaint about the game is I think it would have been really nice to have a board for this game. I understand it is a card game and it's a lane battler. Most of those don't typically come with boards, but I just really would have liked one for this game. I mean, I can't argue too much because I do have a playmat for it. So back to the production, the modifier tiles that you put in the center lane are really nice. They're nice, clacky wooden tiles, which you don't actually handle them a lot. Same thing with the pillar tokens. They're nice wood chonky boys, and really you only handle like each one once per age. And the first player marker is a nice wooden disc as well. And all of these elements are printed on both sides and look really, really nice. And the divine cards, not only are they gorgeous, they also add a ton to the gameplay. I really dig how you get 3 of them, and you draft one of them, and then you give the other two to your opponent. So you know what 2 of their 3 divine cards are. However, you don't know what one of them is, and these cards do all kinds of crazy stuff. So each player does have like a secret weapon, if you will. But those divine cards can really sway things a lot. For instance, one of them is, I think it's just like 5 scorpion votes. So that's kind of a big deal. If you just plop that one on a card that you're either trying to win or trying to lose, to really sway whether it's going to go scorpions or feathers. Or there's another one that flips all of your scorpion / feather votes, and it flips them to the other one. So your opponent's thinking, oh, they're going big on this one, they're hammering feathers or something, then blap, you reveal you're actually doing the opposite of what they thought. And that's what I really dig about this game. I dig that you are able to play 1 card per lane face down, and I like the bluffing aspect of that. And there's also a lot of hand management, because both players receive the same decks, so both players have the same opportunities, the same powers, the same amount of strength, if you will, throughout the entire game. But it's kind of a little bit of luck of the draw, but also when do you play your small cards to intentionally lose? Or when do you play your big cards to intentionally win? Which kind of helps mitigate the whole luck of the draw, because bigger cards aren't always better in this game. One complaint I've had about previous lane battlers is that sometimes they feel kind of samey. And this one, they've kind of fixed that problem with the modifier token and the divine cards, because those things really spice up and add a little bit of variety and zest to the gameplay. And the game kind of has a nice arc to it too, because the stakes get greater as the game progresses. Ages 1 and 2 don't have as high points on them as age 3 does. And the game is very easy to teach. The rulebook is nice and clear. You can probably just read the rules in a couple minutes and actually be ready to play. It comes with nice player aids. Actually, after watching this video, you probably could go ahead and start playing the game. But overall, the production is amazing, the game is fun, it's very approachable, and it doesn't feel exactly the same every time you play it. So I definitely recommend giving this one a try. I'm gonna go ahead and give this one a 4 out of 5. This is certainly one of my favorites, if not my favorite lane battler. I've really enjoyed my plays of it, and I highly recommend it. That is Pillars of Fate by Ivy Studios.